Hi, I'm Em, and this is Fang Farrier. And today we'll be talking about recovering for resilience. Touch, pause, engage. Instructions that might seem out of place on a podcast about stress management and resilience and recovering, but they're instructions that kind of sprung to mind as I was preparing for this episode, and I was doing a bit of research into books I've read and presentations I've attended and people I've spoken with in the realms of sports psychology and sport performance. So if you're unfamiliar, those instructions are more at home on a rugby field and are generally called just before a scrum, or certainly they were kind of pre-2013. So for those unfamiliar with it, a scrum is a method of restarting play after a stoppage, and those instructions kind of sprung to mind as I was reading around all of those things, particularly to do with the All Blacks and the All Blacks kind of performance mentally and physically, is that I was thinking of those instructions in terms of their use and practicality for everybody, for terms of stopping and thinking and engaging in recovery. But I'll kind of come back to that in a bit more detail. So one of the things I kind of ended up reading was an interview that Gilbert Anoka did in a local magazine here in Christchurch. And he is the All Blacks mental skills coach and has been for the last 20 years. He's got the office, is an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to rugby and sports psychology. And just a fascinating person to hear speak. I'd like to read you a quote from that article, answers to two questions, because they particularly rang true for me. So this is it. It said, people get tough by exposing themselves to waves of stress and waves of recovery. It's how you get resilient. In today's world, you get the stress without the recovery. And that's how you get burnt out. It's not the load that breaks you, but the way you carry it. He went on to say, we want people to schedule deliberate recovery activities in their day or week, where they get away from the compression of their environment. When you understand that resilience is a set of skills and not a personality type or disposition, then you become purposeful about the things you need to put into your environment to ensure you perform well. So whilst the context there is rugby, and the audience he was talking to was more with a view to business people in general, not particularly dentists or medics, there's a couple of things on there that really struck me that I kind of wanted to come back to. So first of all, that notion that people get tough by exposing themselves to waves of stress. So exposing themselves to stress. I think stress has been demonized, and it's something that is almost put out there to avoid. And it's, not all stress is alike. We need a certain amount of stress to push us out of our comfort zones, to get us to learn new things and to push on and grow. And yes, that's part of resilience. I've also heard stress kind of talked about in two dimensions, that there's the eustress, which is kind of the good stress, the stuff that we need to do to just progress as humans, be that to get us to crawl, to walk, to do new things, to learn to ride a bike. All of those things were massively stressful when we started to do them. The first time you picked up a a drill and used it on a live patient, massively stressful, but you grew from it, you learnt from it, you adapted to it, and it's moved you forwards. But without that stress, you would never have learnt to walk, have learnt to ride a bike, have learnt to be a dentist. It was all necessary as part of the journey, and you became more resilient by working out how to get over that, through that, round that. And then you've kind of got distress, which is the stuff that is more troubling. It's either a bigger impact or it's more chronic and detrimental long term. But again, the difference between the two can just be how you're managing it and whether or not that stress is the kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, in terms of you are dealing with so many other stresses that sometimes the small stuff that you would normally not even think about can be enough to tip the balance and put you into overwhelm and really challenge any resilience strategies you've got. So it's exposing themselves to waves of stress and waves of recovery, and that again implying that one has to follow the other. We can't just keep stressing ourselves until we break. We need to recharge, recover, build on what we've learned, move forwards again. And within that kind of waves of recovery, we do a lot of things that we think are recovery, but they're not necessarily actually recharging our batteries, getting ourselves up and going and preparing us for the next stage. There is a time to just switch off and do nothing, but it's not necessarily recharging. So we've all got times where we need to flick on the TV and watch something mindless, or read something that requires no thought, maybe even a book we've read 20 times already, or listen to music and just get lost in that. And then there are other things that we do that probably still involve a certain amount of stress, but it's different, and we're learning and we're doing different things. So that might be exercise, it might be a hobby, it might be learning something new, it might be taking up a language, it might be any of those kind of activities. And they're different for all of us in the same kind of way that different things will stress one person out more than another. Certain activities will help somebody with their resilience and their recovery a lot more than the person next to them. Take, for example, yoga. I find yoga really stressful. It's something I've had on my kind of to-do list for a time, and I can do it. I'm going to sound like I'm making excuses for myself, but I've recently put it down to I get a lot of sinus problems. Not so much sinus infections anymore. I had some kind of surgery and that sorted that out. But I get a lot of congestion in my head, and it's just really uncomfortable for me to be kind of doing your downward dog with your head down below your heart all the time. I find it uncomfortable. I find it gives me a headache. I find it stressful. And it's just not an environment I'm at home in. It's too quiet for me. I like a bit of noise. I'm a chatty person. I don't like being frowned at if I make too much noise, and that's what I feel like yoga is for me. So some people find yoga immensely calming and soothing and regenerative, and yeah, I just don't. So it's a case of finding out what works for you. I do need to switch off more. I'm an active recoverer. I like to throw myself into exercise, particularly, but other tasks, other jobs. I like to be kind of a busy downtime. I'm not very good at kind of still downtime. But I have to watch that too. And a preconception people have about exercise is, yes, it's going to release endorphins and I'm going to feel great and this is going to be awesome. But if you're doing too higher intensity exercise too often, your body's going to find it a stressor, and the body's not very good in terms of distinguishing one source of stress from another. So whether it's stress from work, stress from exercising in the wrong way, or stress from comfort eating crappy food and drinking too much, that actually all just adds up as stress. So we just have to be careful that the things we think we're doing to relax and that are soothing us in some ways are actually helping to bring our stress levels down and help us recover. Other things can be, we have an incredibly physical job where we're contorting all the time. And, we think of the positions we hold and the movements we make. And whilst loads of us have got things like golf as a hobby, which is great. You think, that's relaxing. It's a walk. It's hitting things around. It's actually putting an awful lot of twisting forces on your spine. It's locking up your upper back. There's loads of things that are just continuing what we do physically to ourselves every day and aren't necessarily the keys to physically unwinding either. Now, it's not to say that all these things need to come off the list, but at times of low stress, you'll be able to do things that stress you more in your recovery time. At times of really high stress, when you just have work stresses coming out of your ears and your eyeballs, then those things don't have so much of a place, and you do have to tone it down, and you do have to think recovery with diet and movement and activities that will soothe you and recharge you. So, yes, he's saying that with today's world, we get all of that stress without the recovery. And I would add to that and say, or sometimes with well-intentioned wrong recovery that's adding to our stress levels. And that's how we burn out. So, yeah, it's not the load of that stress that's breaking us. It's what we do with it and how we manage it, the way we carry it. So, yeah, we do need to schedule deliberate recovery activities. And to quote a nutrition coach of mine, recovery doesn't happen by accident. Don't wait for recovery to happen. Chase it. It's something you've actively got to do. And it's hard because it feels like extra work when you just want to sit down and do nothing. But, as the old saying goes, if you don't look after your body, where will you live? This is not a short-term, short-burst career that you can just get to the end of this year, next year, 5 years. The idea is that this is kind of a 40, 50-year career, and that might sound bone-chilling to some of you, and it does to me at times. So we need to plan our recovery, and we need to be purposeful with it. We need to be mindful that not one size fits all, and we need to find what works out for us. So there is a time for Netflix, there's a time for exercise, and there's a time to read, and you'll know what's going to work best for you. Maybe learn a new skill or a hobby if you don't have one. And if you can't think of one, think of what you were doing before you went to dental school, or before you were having to kind of fill your life with so many other things you did for fun, for enjoyment. I have ended up, and again it's exercise related because that's just how I roll, but I've ended up back on my bike after years and years and years, and I'm just finding sheer enjoyment out of it the same way I used to when I was a kid. I'm enjoying riding my bike, simple as that sounds. So yeah, do you have a hobby? Think of it, but sometimes you've got to create space for your recovery, because again, this is what Gilbert was saying in this, is he's saying that we need to get away from the compression of our environment. We need to actually force things back to make that space so that we can recover. And I come back to kind of lessons learned from the earthquakes here 10 years ago. And I apply them now to what's going on with COVID, is that if you've constantly got not necessarily your stress, but the world's stresses coming at you again and again and again, and you're just not getting a gap between them, it's going to be very, very difficult to recover. So my advice, as always, will be turn off the news. Yes, catch updates as you need them, but you don't need to catch every hourly update. You don't need to catch every daily briefing. It will filter its way to you. You will find out the important things. You don't need to hinge your life around them, and you will feel better for it. The news can be a terrible representation of what's going on. And that was an experience of mine from the quakes, which I think I'll probably cover in another episode. But just that, it would sensationalize for us every aftershock and put up footage of the original quakes, and would send a panic line across the other side of the world where I would get phone calls to see whether I was okay after something that was really insignificant here. But because it had been kind of boosted up by the media and wanting to kind of keep that hype and interest and fear and momentum going with it, that as someone living it and trying to recover it, it was quite hard, to see that be blown out of proportion every night on the news. So turn off the news. Leave social media if you can. Again, I'm going to talk about social media in a separate episode, but it can be so draining. And if you can't leave it, just engage with it less. Quieten people down who are just preaching stressful things all the time. If your newsfeed is full of people telling you exactly what the news was telling you, or worse, or spreading rumours, or it's not gonna help you at all. Sometimes you need to silence those voices, even if they are friends and family, just for long enough for you to get into place the things you need to recover, to get feeling better and in a better place about these things. Because otherwise you are just going back to that wave analogy. If you've ever been out in the surf and you just, every time you come up for air, you're hit by the next wave, that's what it's like. You need to kind of swim the opposite direction for a while and just get into the shallows and sort yourself out. So do create space for recovery. But the other thing that, again, for like a 2-paragraph thing, there's so much in it, is that resilience is a set of skills, not a personality type or disposition. But if it were a personality type, dentists would be blooming good at it, because actually we deal with stress really well on a day-to-day basis. We have a really stressful job. We have intense one-on-one interactions with patients and staff members alike all day long, every day. Far more than in a lot of jobs and in a lot of worlds that other people are living. We're really good at this. We've adapted to it. We've thrived through it. We've survived dental school, which was a pressure cooker in itself. And we are good at this. So even though it's not a personality type that gets you through resilience, we've actually jumped through a lot of those hoops already. We've shown that we can do it. We just have to apply it in a way that's going to work for us. So it's a set of skills, and like any set of skills, they get better as we practice them and as we use them. So yes, be more purposeful about what's going on in and around you. And I'm just going to leave you with another quote. I feel this episode has all been quotes, but it's not a quote. This is something Shaquille O'Neal, the basketball player's mother, was talking to him after a basketball camp he'd been at, where he was doubting his future. And his mum said to him, "Try harder." And he said, I can't do that right now. Maybe later. And she said, later doesn't always come to everybody. I think we're more appreciative of that now than at any time, because there's lots of laters that aren't coming to so many from this last year. So touch, pause, engage. Touch base with how you're feeling, how you're managing the current stress around you. Touch base with what activities are doing for you. Are they recharging your batteries? Are they lifting your spirits? Are they helping you get through things? Or are they making it more difficult? Pause. Stop for a moment. Let the emotion roll by and deal with it with a calm head. Think about what you're doing next. Think about how to manage it. Think about what you can control and what you can't control. And the stuff you can't control, you either, like the news, switch it off, or you find a different way to think about it. Engage. Engage in those recovery activities that work well for you. So for you, that might be yoga and wine. For me, it's probably exercising far too hard and stressing myself out a little bit more, but feeling like I'm alive and strong and ready for the next day. So we're all different. You can try lots of different things, but don't be disheartened that if something that is working for someone else really doesn't work for you. There's so much to try. Just pay attention to what works. So look after yourselves. Happy 2021. And as always, if you want to join the conversation, find me on Twitter at Fang_Farrier. Cheers. See you next time.